I met Fabian almost exactly 2 years ago, at the most unexpected moment. I was at Trader Joe's grabbing a few things when I noticed a heated exchange near the front. The store manager was tearing into someone over a parking issue, just full on red in the face, waving his hands like the guy had set the place on fire or something. And the guy, Fabian, he wasn't yelling back or arguing, just standing there, clearly embarrassed. I don't even know why I got involved, but I found myself stepping in and saying, "Hey, those signs outside are super confusing. Maybe we can all take a breath here." The manager glared, but eventually backed off. Fabian looked relieved, and when we both ended up in the checkout line, he turned to me and asked if he could buy me a coffee to say thanks. We hit it off immediately. He was tall, had that slightly crooked smile that made my stomach flip, and he actually listened, like, really listened. He remembered the small stuff I said and would text me good morning every single day. By the third date, I was already catching feelings, hard. My parents have always been incredibly supportive. After college, they helped me get an apartment and even pitched in on my car payments while I figured things out professionally. I felt a bit guilty about it, but they always said they just wanted to help until I found my footing. Fabian moved in about 8 months in. It was sooner than I expected, but his living situation fell apart, and it just felt like the right thing to do at the time. My parents were cautiously hopeful. My mom liked him right away, and although my dad took a little longer to warm up, he eventually came around. They even played golf together a few times. In our family, that's basically a handshake deal with your soul. Everything felt solid until it didn't. Around 6 months ago, Fabian's parents started visiting more often. They lived an hour away but would come by for dinner or brunch. His mom, Lydia, was overly complimentary about the decor, my cooking, everything. His dad, Arthur, was polite but distant, like he was watching a play instead of being part of the moment. Then came a strange evening. Lydia got teary-eyed looking around and said, "It feels like a real home here. It's been ages since we felt that." Arthur nodded and said something like, "Our Fabian is a treasure. We hope you two stay together for a long, long time." It felt off. Too much. Looking back, there were signs I brushed off. Fabian made these casual jokes about how I had a golden setup thanks to my dad. Every time we got something new for the apartment, he'd immediately text his parents with a photo. He always talked about chasing big career goals, but I never really saw him move on anything. When we were around my parents, he'd either clam up or shift the topic if money or business came up. And if my dad mentioned his company, suddenly Fabian was all ears, asking questions, playing the eager listener. But when we were alone, he'd toss little digs, calling my dad old school, or saying things like, "Must be nice to be born ahead in the race." Then one night, while we were scrolling through Instagram together, he came across a photo of his ex and said, "She had the look but not the stability." When I asked what that meant, he kissed my forehead and said, "You're the whole package." It didn't sit right with me. I started noticing his phone habits. He'd smile at messages but put the phone face down if I walked by. Once I saw him texting someone about things looking up financially. He brushed it off as a buddy talking about a job opportunity. I wanted to believe him, but then I overheard him talking to his mom more than once. Phrases like, "It's comfortable," or "I'm just holding on for now." Each time, the moment he noticed me nearby, he'd switch gears, loudly talking about brunch or movie nights. Eventually, I started recording bits of his phone conversations. I know how that sounds, but my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. Most of the recordings were harmless. Then came that dinner. His parents invited us over for this fancy evening. Steaks, salads, the whole 9 yards. Lydia couldn't stop gushing about how good Fabian had it with someone so steady. Arthur asked about my dad's business again, even though we'd already talked about it in the past. After dinner, I offered to cut the pie Lydia had baked. I left my phone recording on the dining table and walked to the kitchen. There's a half wall between the rooms, so I could still hear them. Fabian laughed that laugh he does when he's trying too hard, and then said, "She's convenient. Her dad's support keeps things comfortable while I figure things out." My hands froze. Then came the part that really hit. I'll hang on long enough to get what I need, then find someone who's actually worth showing off. Arthur made this amused grunt. Lydia's voice was quiet but crystal clear. "Just don't get her pregnant." That's when I knew this wasn't love. It was a strategy. Can you imagine being tied to someone's family forever, just because it's convenient for them? I stood there in that kitchen, knife in hand, my whole body burning. Fabian had just called my dad an arrogant old goat and said if it weren't for the money, he wouldn't even bother saying hello. I wanted to scream, to throw something, or just walk out the front door and never come back. But instead, I kept slicing that pie. Perfect triangles, one after the other. I wasn't thinking. My body just moved. I walked back into the dining room like nothing happened, smiled, set down the plates, served dessert. I even laughed at a few of their jokes. When Fabian kissed my cheek, I didn't flinch. I asked Lydia how her garden was doing. I smiled through it all. And when it was time to go, I grabbed my phone from the table like it was just another night. Back at the apartment, the one my parents were still paying for, Fabian kicked off his shoes, flopped on the couch, and acted like everything was perfectly normal. Because for him, it was. I didn't say anything that night, or the next, or the one after. I just watched. I saw how he'd scroll through my dad's business page when he thought I wasn't looking. How he'd suggest we visit my parents when our fridge was nearly empty. How he always managed to bring up his student loans when my dad was within earshot. A week passed. I barely slept. I kept playing that recording over and over, wondering if I'd misheard, if maybe I was being too sensitive. But no, his words were crystal clear. She's convenient. Her dad's money keeps me comfortable. I'll find someone worth showing off. I stopped eating. I barely spoke. I'd lock myself in the bathroom and sit on the floor for hours trying to figure out what to do. Fabian noticed something was off, but instead of asking if I was okay, he just seemed irritated, kept asking if I was hormonal or just being dramatic. And then, my mom dropped by unexpectedly one afternoon. Fabian was out with friends. She took one look at me and immediately sat me down. "What's going on? Is Fabian acting normal?" she asked, studying my face. I wasn't even crying. I'd moved past tears by then. I just felt hollow. So I asked her, "Do you want to hear something?" She nodded, calm but serious. "Yes, just don't stop." I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memos, hit play. We sat in silence as Fabian's voice filled the kitchen. "She's convenient. Her dad's money keeps me comfortable." When he got to the part about my dad being an arrogant old goat, I saw my mom's hands start to tremble. When the recording ended, she didn't speak right away. She just stood up, grabbed her coat, and said, "Don't let him come back here tonight." "Where are you going?" I asked. "To your father. Wait here." I sat alone after she left. My phone buzzed. A text from Fabian. "Grabbing drinks with the guys. BB back late. Don't wait up." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and started making a list. First update. Thank you so much for all the support on my last post. I wasn't expecting that kind of response, but I truly appreciate every single message. A lot of you asked for updates, so here's what happened next. That night, my parents showed up at my apartment. I've never seen my dad that quiet before. Normally, he fills the room. Jokes, questions, small talk. But when he walked through the door, he just nodded at me. My mom was right behind him, one hand on his back like she was steadying him. She told him I had something to play for him. My stomach twisted, but I pulled out my phone again. For a moment, I wanted to take it back, to pretend everything was fine, because once you hear the truth, you can't unhear it. Things change, but I hit play anyway. Watching my dad listen to Fabian's voice, I don't even know how to describe it. He didn't say a word at first, just stared down at the phone, listening. When it got to the part about me being convenient and him being the arrogant old goat, I saw it. A flicker. Not anger exactly. More like quiet understanding. When it ended, he didn't explode. He just sat there, then reached across the table and took my hand. And instead of asking, "What are you going to do?" or "How could this happen?" he said, "Are you okay?" I didn't expect that. I hadn't even considered whether I was okay. I was too busy thinking about next steps, about betrayal, about survival. But as soon as he asked, I broke. For the first time since everything happened, I cried. Hard. He didn't let go of my hand. Mom made tea, her answer to everything. And when I finally calmed down, Dad asked, "When did you record that?" "A week ago," I said. He nodded slowly like it made sense now. Then he asked, "Where is Fabian right now?" I checked my phone. 3 new texts. Getting another round. Mike says hi. "Don't wait up, babe." So normal. So clueless. I told my dad Fabian was out with friends, probably gone for hours. That's when his posture changed. He sat up straighter, more focused. Then he asked, "Do you have your laptop?" I grabbed it from the couch where I'd left it open, still with my what now list on the screen. He looked at it and smiled. Just a little. Turns out we'd both been making the same kind of list. We spent the next 2 hours making a plan. My dad wasn't loud. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. But somehow that made everything more intense. He opened the Notes app on his phone and started building a checklist, step by step, not out of anger, but with complete focus. I expected fury. What I got was strategy. First on his list? The apartment. He had co-signed the lease and was covering the rent, so he called the property manager right there at my kitchen table. Calmly, clearly, he told her he needed to cancel the current lease and sign a new one under my name only. When she hesitated, mentioning fees and paperwork, he cut her off. "I'll cover whatever fees are required," he said. "I just need this done immediately." When she still didn't commit, he offered to come to the office in the morning, and suddenly she became very cooperative. Next up, the car. Fabian had been using mine, the same car my dad had been helping me pay off. Dad called our insurance agent, removed Fabian from the policy on the spot, then opened the app and switched the payments over to my account. He told me he'd still help with the cost if I needed it, but the financial responsibility had to be mine now. While Dad handled logistics, Mom and I made a list of Fabian's belongings. His clothes, his gaming setup, some bathroom stuff. That was pretty much it. Most of the furniture and appliances were either mine or bought with help from my parents. It was sobering to realize how little of that space had really been his. And then I remembered something. Fabian's sister, Catalina, had been working at my dad's company. She'd gotten the job 6 months earlier, right after Fabian casually mentioned that she was looking for a new opportunity. My dad had interviewed her as a favor to me and hired her. I hesitated to say anything. It felt petty. But my mom noticed me hesitating over my keyboard and gently asked what I was holding back. When I finally told them about Catalina, my dad's face went still. He didn't react immediately, just quietly picked up his phone again. He didn't fire her, he's not that kind of person, but he did email HR and ask that her position be included in an upcoming restructuring review. He was clear. He wasn't asking them to remove her without reason, but her role should be treated as non-essential if cuts had to be made. Cold? Maybe. But Catalina had been coasting. She was consistently late, took long breaks, and wasn't exactly known for her effort. The only reason she'd lasted this long? Fabian. Around midnight, we reached the final task, the confrontation. Dad wanted to call Fabian's parents then and there, but Mom suggested we wait until morning. And I agreed. I was drained. We all needed rest and clear heads. Dad stayed the night. Mom went home to pack a few things. Together we changed the locks. Not a full replacement, luckily. Our building uses digital keypads, so we just reset the code from the app. I can't even explain the relief I felt watching Fabian's access disappear. I let my parents take the bedroom. I crashed on the couch. I couldn't bear the idea of sleeping in that bed again. At around 3 a.m., my phone lit up with messages. "The code's not working. Eleanor? WTF? Are you serious? Let me in. It's freezing. Answer your phone." I turned it face down, put it on silent. For the first time in over a week, I actually slept. The next morning felt surreal. Dad made pancakes like it was just a normal weekend. We sat at the table, scrolling our phones, talking about the weather. I couldn't tell if we were pretending everything was fine or if that strange calm was real. Fabian had stopped texting around 5 a.m., probably crashed at a friend's place. At 10 odd a.m., Dad said it was time. My stomach twisted. Mom squeezed my shoulder and reminded me, "You haven't done anything wrong. You're not the one who should feel ashamed." Dad started a video call. After 3 rings, Lydia answered. Her face lit up with that fake bright smile like she was happy to see us. Arthur was in the background reading a newspaper. The smile dropped when she saw our expressions. She called Arthur over. He put the paper down and leaned into frame, frowning slightly. Dad didn't waste time on small talk. He simply asked, "Would you like to hear something?" and hit play. Watching their expressions change as Fabian's voice played was something I won't forget. Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. Arthur's frown deepened. But what struck me most, neither of them looked shocked by what was said, only that they were caught saying it. When it ended, Lydia was the first to speak. "It was just talk," she said. "He didn't mean any of it. They were just joking." Arthur tried to act disappointed, like this was all news to him. But it wasn't convincing. My dad let them ramble for about half a minute before cutting in. Calmly, directly, he laid it all out. Fabian was off the lease. He no longer had access to the car. And any financial support? Done. It was over. Fully. Completely. Catalina's position at my dad's company was now officially under review. And when Lydia heard that, her expression crumbled. She turned to me, tears in her eyes, practically begging. "Didn't you know how much Fabian loved you?" she asked. "Weren't you planning a future together? Everyone says things they don't mean sometimes." I just looked at her, at the same woman who'd sat at my table, smiled at me, complimented my home, while behind my back, told her son not to get me pregnant because it would tie him to my family. She had eaten my food while thinking I wasn't good enough for her son. My mom leaned into the camera then and said flatly, "Enough." No one was smiling anymore. She told them goodbye, and my dad ended the call without waiting for their reply. We sat in silence for a moment. Then my dad's phone buzzed. It was Fabian. "Where are you? Why can't I get into the apartment? What's going on?" Dad typed a response and showed it to me for approval. I nodded. "Eleanor knows everything. Your belongings will be with the building manager. Do not contact her again." The next few hours felt like erasing someone from my life in real time. We packed his things, clothes, his game console, his toiletries. I came across the hoodie I used to wear when he was away, the mug I gave him last Christmas, a photo of us framed from that beach trip last summer. Each item felt tainted now. We had just taped the final box shut when we heard shouting from outside. I looked out the window. There he was, Fabian, standing on the front steps of our building, ringing the buzzer again and again. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair a mess. He looked tired, angry, maybe both. When he saw my dad in the window, he started yelling louder, demanding answers, demanding access, saying this was his home too. Dad calmly pulled the blinds closed. Fabian kept buzzing for almost 20 minutes. Then, silence. I peeked out again and saw him slumped on the steps, head in his hands. And for a second, a small, irrational second, I felt sorry for him. Until I remembered, she's convenient. Her dad's money keeps me comfortable. I'll find someone worth showing off. At 4 p.m., Dad took Fabian's boxes down to the building manager, just like we'd planned. Mom and I stayed in the apartment, flinching every time we heard footsteps outside. We ordered pizza, but barely touched it. The shock had finally set in. 2 years of my life had been built on lies. Just after 8 p.m., the buzzer rang again. Fabian. He looked worse than before, even through the blurry security cam feed. I decided to answer this time. Just the intercom, nothing more. His voice was slurred, desperate. He said we needed to talk, that this was all a misunderstanding. When I didn't reply, he got defensive. Angry. Accused me of trusting my parents over him. Called me a daddy's girl. Asked if I was really throwing everything away over one stupid comment. I took a breath. Then I said it. I reminded him what he'd said. That I was convenient. That he'd planned to use me, then leave me for someone else. That his parents laughed about it with him. There was a long silence. Then his tone changed. Cold. Sharp. Calculating. He asked if I'd recorded him. Said maybe I didn't know the laws in our state, that I could get in trouble for it. Was I aware of the consequences? My dad gently took the phone from me. He told Fabian, calmly but firmly, that if he didn't leave immediately, we would contact the police. That building security had already been alerted, that we had camera footage of him harassing me, and that he had 10 minutes to leave the property. Fabian started yelling again, but Dad ended the call. Mom phoned security while Dad and I watched the hallway feed. A few minutes later, 2 guards approached Fabian. He argued, waved his arms around, but eventually, they walked him off the property. That night, we jumped at every noise. Dad slept on the couch. Mom stayed in the room with me. I checked the security app over and over, expecting to see Fabian trying to come back. But he didn't. The next morning, we went straight to the leasing office. Finalized the new lease. Everything in my name. The car insurance was updated. My bank accounts were secure. I changed all my passwords. Logged Fabian out of everything. Netflix, Spotify, Amazon. It was like erasing a presence, one login at a time. The property manager confirmed he'd picked up his boxes. Security had clear instructions. Fabian wasn't to enter without my permission. Later that day, my parents helped me move some furniture around. It might sound silly, but shifting the layout helped. It made the space feel less like ours and more like mine. They stayed one more night. Then they had to go back home. At the door, Mom hugged me tightly. Dad stood for a moment like he wanted to say something deep. But in the end, he just kissed my forehead and told me to call them. day or night. And then I was alone for the first time in almost 2 years. The apartment felt quiet, too quiet. I wandered from room to room, unsure what to do with the silence. Eventually, I ordered takeout and sat on the floor in the living room, eating it straight from the box. Just me, just my space. And for once, that was enough. Sitting at the kitchen table felt too normal, too much like before. So instead, I just sat on the living room floor, picking at takeout I barely tasted. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You've made a huge mistake." I didn't need to guess who it was. I blocked the number without replying and powered off my phone. But I didn't sleep. I lay awake until sunrise, listening for footsteps that never came. Final update. It's been 2 weeks since everything came crashing down. And honestly, I'm drained. Every day it's something. Texts from unknown numbers, voicemails, Instagram messages from fake accounts. It's like dealing with a ghost who refuses to leave. This morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from different numbers, all between 2 and 6 a.m. I've blocked so many at this point that my blocked list is longer than my actual contacts. Fabian's clearly using burner apps or borrowing friends' phones. At first, I listened to the voicemails, hoping maybe I'd hear real remorse, but they just got worse. The first few were what you'd expect. He was sorry. He didn't mean it. He was just trying to impress his parents. Then came the guilt trips. How could I do this to him? Didn't I care about how much he was hurting? By day 4, it turned manipulative. "Remember when I took care of you when you had the flu? Remember our beach trip?" Lately, they've bounced between threats and desperation. Yesterday's message? I ruined his life. His sister lost her job because of me. His parents are disappointed. He's practically homeless. Then, 20 minutes later, he misses me so much he can't sleep. He just wants to talk. What's harder than the messages is how often I still almost respond. My thumb will hover over the keyboard before I snap out of it. 2 years is a long time. There are still moments when I miss the version of him I thought was real, but then I play the recording again. "Her dad's money keeps me comfortable. I'll find someone worth showing off. Just don't get her pregnant." Yesterday, my friend Julia came over. She's been checking in every few days. We were sitting on the couch scrolling TikTok when my phone buzzed with another random number. I ignored it. She asked what was going on, and I realized I hadn't told our mutual friends the full story. I'd just said the breakup was messy, so I showed her the recording. I watched her face shift. Confusion, shock, then a kind of quiet fury I've never seen from her. When it ended, she was silent for a moment. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. Fabian had texted her 3 days ago. He told her I was acting unstable, that I'd made up some wild story about him, and that he was worried about me. He even suggested that maybe they should stage some kind of intervention. Julia had been vague in her responses because she wasn't sure what to believe, but now she knew. She showed me the messages. They were worse than I imagined. He told her my parents were enabling some kind of breakdown and that he just wanted to help but couldn't reach me. He was trying to flip the narrative, make me sound irrational. Gaslight my friends. Julia immediately started messaging people in our circle to warn them. While she did that, I checked my email, and sure enough, he'd been messaging me there too. Dozens of emails I'd missed while I was focused on blocking him everywhere else. Some had attachments, photos of us, screenshots of sweet things I'd texted, a video from Christmas where I'm opening the necklace he gave me, smiling. It all felt like emotional blackmail. A silent, "Look how good it was. Look what you're throwing away." I deleted everything, then set up filters so any email from him goes straight to trash. After Julia left, I barely slept. Every creak, every gust of wind made me jump. I kept checking the lock on the door. At 2 a.m., I started scrolling through old texts, looking for red flags I'd missed. There were so many comments about my dad's business, questions about money, hints I should ask my parents for things he wanted. It was all there. I just hadn't seen it. The next morning, I woke to knocking. Not at my door, but my neighbor's. I looked through the peephole. Fabian. He looked polished, clean shirt. The one I bought him for his birthday. He was holding coffee and a bag from my favorite bakery. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I watched as my neighbor Orlando opened his door, clearly confused. Fabian was saying something about surprising me, claiming he'd forgotten his key. But thankfully, Orlando's not the type to just accept things at face value. He asked why Fabian didn't just call me. Fabian stammered through some excuse about wanting it to be a surprise. Orlando said he'd check with me first, then shut the door. A moment later, my phone buzzed. A text from Orlando. "Hey, there's some guy named Fabian here. Should I let him in?" I replied, "Absolutely not. We broke up. He's not welcome." He sent back a thumbs up. Then I watched through the peephole as Orlando stepped back into the hall and firmly told Fabian I didn't want to see him. And just like that, the mask dropped. That polite, charming smile disappeared. Fabian's face twisted. He started arguing, raising his voice. But Orlando, who's 6'4", built like a linebacker and not easily intimidated, just stood there calmly, arms crossed. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Orlando didn't flinch. He just stood there, arms crossed, calm, unmoving, until Fabian finally gave up and walked away. I texted him a thank you with about 15 exclamation marks. He replied instantly. He gave me weird energy. "Let me know if you need anything. Note to self, bake Orlando some cookies. The man deserves a whole bakery." That afternoon, I was on a Zoom call for work when my buzzer rang. I checked the building's camera feed. It was Lydia, Fabian's mother, standing at the entrance with a gift basket in her hands. I ignored it. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again, then again, and again. Eventually, I picked up the intercom and asked what she wanted. Her voice was overly sweet, almost syrupy. She said she just wanted to talk woman to woman. Said there had been a huge misunderstanding. That Fabian was heartbroken. That surely I could give him a chance to explain. I told her I'd already heard all I needed to. That recording had said it all. Immediately, her tone changed. The warmth vanished. She asked if I was aware that recording someone without their consent was illegal in our state, that they could take legal action if they wanted. I nearly laughed. I told her the recording was made in their house, during a dinner they invited me to. I hadn't published it, hadn't used it for anything other than privately explaining to my parents and a couple close friends why the relationship ended. If they wanted to press charges, they were welcome to try. Then I hung up. I watched on the camera feed as she stood at the door for another 10 minutes before finally placing the gift basket down and leaving. The building manager texted me later, letting me know a package had been removed from my door. I told them to toss it. That evening, my dad called to check in. He tried to sound casual, but I could hear the tension in his voice. Fabian had shown up at his office, made a scene in the lobby, started yelling, said my dad had destroyed his life and turned me against him. Security escorted him out before it could get worse. Dad insisted it was fine, that it hadn't disrupted business, but I knew he was just trying to keep me from worrying. It was escalating. The next day, Saturday, I decided I needed to get out. I'd been hiding in my apartment for days. I found a quiet little cafe a few blocks away, ordered a latte, and sat in the corner with my book, trying to feel like myself again. But halfway through my drink, I felt it. That sharp instinct, the unmistakable sense of being watched. I looked up. Catalina, Fabian's sister, standing by the counter staring at me. Our eyes met. She didn't say a word, just gave me the coldest look I've ever seen, then turned and walked out. I tried to focus on my book, but my hands were shaking. After 15 minutes, I gave up and took the long way home, checking behind me every few steps. It was ridiculous. I hadn't done anything wrong. Yet somehow I felt like I was the one who had to hide. When I got back to my apartment, my mom was waiting in the lobby with groceries and dinner, said she just wanted to check in. We spent the evening watching Netflix, not talking about Fabian. It was exactly what I needed. She stayed the night on the couch. Around midnight, the texts started again. Same pattern. Unknown numbers. Apologies 1 minute, anger the next. I silenced my phone and went to bed. The next morning, we were having coffee when there was a loud banging on the door. Not a knock. Pounding. Like someone was trying to break it down. I looked through the peephole. Fabian, disheveled, angry, yelling my name, demanding I open the door. Mom called building security while I stood frozen. He kicked the door once, then again. Each sound made me jump. I found my voice and told him to leave. Security was on the way. He laughed, actually laughed. Said he just wanted 5 minutes. Said he could explain everything. I asked, was he denying what he said? Silence. Then more pounding. He wasn't denying it. He was just furious he'd been caught. Security arrived a few minutes later. 2 guards who looked more annoyed than alarmed at first. I could hear them outside, telling Fabian he needed to leave. Voices were raised. There was scuffling. Then quiet. A message buzzed on my phone. It was the building team. Fabian had been removed, and the police had been called. Apparently, he'd shoved one of the guards when they tried to escort him out. Mom and I stood in the kitchen, saying nothing, just looking at each other. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was becoming dangerous. She suggested I come stay with them for a while, but it felt like giving up. This was my home. I didn't want to be forced out of it, so I finally did what I should have done days ago. I filed for a restraining order. The process was easier than I thought. I had everything: recordings, security footage, messages, emails, witnesses. I submitted it all. Mom stayed another night. The next day, Dad came over to install a Ring camera by the door. They were worried. Honestly, so was I. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. Or maybe it always was, and I just hadn't seen it. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, things went quiet. 4 days. No messages, no calls, no visitors. I started to relax, just a little. I went back to work, picked up groceries, had dinner with Julia and some friends. Simple things, normal things. And for the first time in weeks, I began to believe, maybe this really is the end. I was careful not to post anything about where I'd been or where I was going. No check-ins, no location tags, nothing. I just wanted to keep a low profile. Then yesterday, I came home and found a manila envelope on the floor, slipped under my apartment door. No name, no address, just blank. Inside was a handwritten letter from Fabian. 12 pages. 12. It started out as some kind of love letter. He listed everything he supposedly adored about me, every moment he claimed to cherish. There were references to trips we'd taken, jokes we used to tell, even ideas he said he'd had for our future. But the last page was different. The handwriting shifted, messier, angrier, like his control had cracked. He wrote that if he couldn't have me, he'd make sure no one would want me. That he had videos of me, videos that would be embarrassing if they were ever released. That he knew things about my dad's business that could cause problems. There were no videos. We'd never recorded anything like that. But just the threat felt violating, and whatever he thought he knew about my dad's company was either fabricated or dangerously misunderstood. Still, the fact that he'd even go there? I called my dad. Then I called the police. They took the letter as evidence of a restraining order violation. The officer who came out seemed tired, like this kind of thing was routine. She took my statement, bagged the envelope, said they'd look into it. I didn't expect much. At around 3 a.m., I heard a noise on my balcony. Now, keep in mind, I live on the second floor, but my balcony connects to a fire escape. I froze. Another sound, like someone gently testing the sliding glass door. I whispered into my phone, calling 911. The dispatcher told me to lock myself in the bathroom and wait for officers to arrive. I grabbed my keys and my phone and did exactly that. Heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. From behind the bathroom door, I heard the slider open. Footsteps, and then his voice, quiet, measured, calling my name, Fabian. I don't remember much after that. There was yelling, a crash, something heavy falling over, the sound of boots, then a knock on the bathroom door. "It's the police. You can come out now." I was shaking so hard I could barely move. Fabian had been arrested, again, this time for breaking and entering, violating the restraining order, and resisting arrest. One officer said he was clearly intoxicated and had gotten aggressive when they tried to handcuff him. He'd knocked over my coffee table, shattered the glass top, and broken several framed photos. I spent the rest of the night at my parents' house. In the morning, I got a call. Fabian had been released on bail. Released. But now he had to wear an ankle monitor and stay at least 500 feet away from me, my apartment, and my job. If he broke those conditions, they said, he'd be arrested again immediately. After that call, I sat on my old childhood bed and broke. Not quiet tears. The kind of sobbing that leaves you hollow and breathless. Mom came in and sat beside me, wrapping her arms around me. She didn't say anything. She just held me. When I finally calmed down, she asked the big question. What do you want to do next? Did I want to move to a new apartment? Press more charges? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Right now, I'm sitting in my parents' guest room. There are old stuffed animals in the corner and a shelf full of high school trophies. I feel like two people at once, like a frightened little girl and an exhausted woman who's simply had enough. Then this afternoon, the police called again. Fabian had taken off his ankle monitor, just removed it. He's gone. They're looking for him, but so far they haven't found him. The officer on the phone advised me to stay somewhere he wouldn't think to look. So that's where I am, hiding. While police search for the man who broke into my home, threatened to release fake videos of me, and tried to use my family's trust for his own benefit. I keep thinking about that moment in their kitchen, when I heard him laugh and say I was convenient. How I just kept cutting the pie, smiling, serving dessert like nothing was wrong. I wish I'd thrown the pie in his face. I wish I'd walked out right then. I wish I'd never met him. But it's too late for wishes. Now all I can do is figure out where I go from here.